Hmm. Uh, huh?
You're listening to Cryptid Clues, featuring your hosts, Taylor Field and Ruben Olson.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Taylor Field, your host on today's episode. Today we got a great topic to dive into, the orbs or flashing lights. But before we get into that, a couple of plugs just to dive into here. Check us out on our website, CryptidClues.ca. You can find us on social media as well. Cryptid Clues on Twitter, Facebook, even YouTube. And we're also on Patreon, where you can get ad-free early episodes. Additionally, you can send us an email, cryptidclues@gmail.com. If you want to say hi, have any experiences or stories you want to talk about, just reach out, let us know. But without further ado, let's get into the orbs, the balls of light that people are seeing everywhere around the world. The orbs have been something that's been reported for decades upon decades, even go back as centuries far. Some of the many names that these orbs have are will-o-wisps, that's per English folklore, hinky-punks, wanderlights, ignis fatuus, which is Latin for foolish fire, luz mala, evil light as per Argentina, where they actually believe the light is white. It represents a soul. But if the light is red, it's more of a satanic force trying to tempt the onlooker. These lights are referenced in so many other cultures around the world. Canada, America, Mexico, Germany, Netherlands, and many more places. But what are these things? They're popping up everywhere, and there's some parts of the world that may have more of a spiritual aspect, and then there are other parts of the world that have more of a scientific backing to them. And again, there's some that just are inexplainable. Baseline description, however, atmospheric lights, sometimes these are appearing in swampish areas, and as per folklore, would often recede back when people would approach them, and in turn, be pulling travelers away from the safety of the roads they're trekking on. That's basically the kind of old school narrative that these things kind of had to them. So let's dive into the theories as to how these exist. If you want a mental image per se, you could look at like a firefly. This is a naturally glowing entity, insect, and just the way it's moving around and such. One of the most accepted theories, however, was discovered by a man named Alessandro Volta. He was an Italian physicist, chemist, and actually was the inventor of the battery. He discovered methane in 1776, and he believes that when lightning mixed with some swamp gases, it would actually cause this lighted apparition. Now, this type of hypothesis was actually pretty controversial at the time, even disregarded mostly due to the fact that these lights would recede when they were approached, which makes sense. They're sure popping up from gaseous interaction and combustion with other natural elements, but what's really covering and explaining the fact that they're moving away when you try to approach them? Maybe it is something that's just kind of reacting to the composition of us as a living organic biological entity. Who knows? But I found that very interesting. With the technology that we have these days, though, of course, they can confirm that most of this theory is actually in part true. Burning gases develop from the breakdown of organic matter in persistently wet areas, and then it can conjure up certain things like these lights that people are sometimes seeing. But not all the time are these lights seen in swampy, persistently wet areas. That's the catch. There was an area that actually had, to this day, a large occurrent amount of light sightings that don't have a specific scientific backing and are genuinely unknown due to the fact that they're appearing, again, like I said, far away from a swamp. The kind of go-to explanation for this is campfires or headlights on the highways, and some of them is debunked as such, rightfully so. This is the Marfa lights near US Route 67 on Mitchell Flat east of Marfa, Texas. So the historical first record of the Marfa lights was in 1883, A farmhand by the name of Robert Reed Ellison saw a flickering light as he was directing cattle through the Pisano Pass. Soon, he learned from other settlers that they often saw lights as well, and upon further investigation, no ashes or campfire remains were to be found. There is an estimated 43 Marfa light sightings between 1945 and 2008 alone. There is suspicions to suspect. There is reason to suspect there's a lot more that were not accounted for, and that's kind of based on the fact that they lights kind of get like missed in certain parts of the research. They're kind of like set up stations and everything. This area has had a lot of people come together that are kind of coming to see not only as a tourist spot, but do the research and spend consistent amount of time, periods of days, just recording how often these lights appear and what could be prompting them. And this goes hand in hand with car lights and stuff like that, and campfires. Really, that's kind of why they go with it. That basic explanation, really. And I have to just defer back to when you look at 1883. I mean, they had campfires, sure, but they weren't prominently running around with batteries and flashlights and cars and headlights at that time period. But when you have these people all coming to claim that they actually saw these lights, again, other settlers were putting out these statements saying, hey, we saw the lights too. There were no ashes or campfires that were around, but these things were just moving around. So do I think that these have real credibility to them? I mean, I do. I you see it represented in interesting forms of media where, the soul leaves the body or something like that. Let's say I'm going to use Harry Potter as a reference. Harry Potter, they mention hinky punks in Harry Potter. And then again, when the Dementors in Prisoner of Azkaban are sucking out the soul of Sirius Black, it is a white light. Now, the white lights, again, like I mentioned prior, in certain cultures, they're viewed at as being a soul moving on, or maybe a soul in need, in distress. There's several colored lights that get reported. There are white lights, there are blue lights, there are green ones and red ones even. And I mentioned the red one prior. I'm actually going to be diving into a quote, an account that I will be quoting, which kind of goes into an actual experience with a red light. This account that I'll be relaying to you, this person I've actually been corresponding with for some time now. They have a great bundle of experiences and insight into not only these orbs, but so many cryptid phenomenals. They gave me permission to share this orb experience they have. And I can't, again, if you're listening, I can't thank you enough for letting me bring this story to light. It's incredible. So before we get into that, I'm just going to jump to a quick ad break, and then we'll be right back. And we're back. So, quote unquote here, the first thing that sparked my interest in supernatural mysteries was seeing a red orb with my dad when I was 12. Right off the northeast corner of Lake Monroe in Kissimmee, Florida. This one freaks me out looking back. We went to stock car races and were in our way back to my aunt's house. It's big, in the woods off a private road. We turned off the main road onto her street. I believe, but I had a hard time remembering anything up until we saw it. We were off the main into her dirt road. We would have been turning right into her driveway, but about 15 feet past, about 15 to 20 feet in the air, maybe 10 feet from the woods, there was a red orb floating there, like it was waiting for us. Small beach ball size. It glowed deep red, but it didn't radiate much. Perfectly still, we stared at it for between 5 and 20 seconds. I can't be sure, and my dad was in the middle of saying, "What the hell is that?" when it shot away to the southeast, diagonally to our right. We turned down the driveway, and when we got back to the guest house, my cousin and friend, who was with us on vacation, were up listening out the window. They says right before we got back, the woods were erupting with every animal. Something was riling them up. They also asked why we were so late, roughly an hour later than we should have been. My dad doesn't like to talk about it. His memory is foggy, and we didn't talk about it for years. when I brought it up 4 years later, he says he doesn't remember, but he thinks he remembers seeing an owl. At the time, I was ignorant to owls and supernatural, but I've since read a few books, including Mike Leland's Messengers, that draw those connections, and it freaks me out. My friend, which I'll call R, I won't drop an actual name here. My friend R will still bring it up when I see him sometimes. That was Easter break 2001. I remember the track layout we were at, the concession stands, the parking lot, and leaving. After that, just being there by my aunt's house with that orb floating there. Yeah, that orb was by far the weirdest thing that's ever happened to me. I don't think I was predisposed to anything. I just think I might pay closer attention to that kind of stuff since I've had that first experience. But that thing, the way it just sat so unnatural, still, and once we were sitting there for a moment observing it, it just shot off on a direct path. It seemed so purposeful. I talked to a guy about it and he called it a drone, which I thought was interesting. I made him clarify. He didn't mean a man-made drone. He specifically meant intelligently natured, non-human controlled drone. End quote. Thank you again for allowing me to share that experience. It is quite astounding how attractive these lights can sometimes be. I relate it to an anglerfish, basically, baiting its prey. I'm not saying it's always a trap and you're trying to be baited, but just the concept of being placed into that trance and almost mystified by the light. It's the same thing with little children. When you put them in a room and you have a TV or lights on, they're drawn to it, like insects are drawn to a ultraviolet light, a buzz zapper. And there's something about the light that just pulls people in. So there are a few things from this account. There is this lost time, the memory of an owl, the direction of this light, all these different factors that I find fascinating. In previous episodes, I've dived into the fact with Ruben, like, hey, a lot of extraterrestrial UFO occurrences sometimes have relation to owls. And if you are a little foggy on your memory, missing time, but one of the things you remember is an owl, that's, again, fascinating. It makes me wonder, what is the bridge here? And maybe this is me diving a little too far into it and trying to bridge this connection. It very well could have just been an owl flying over. A lot of people have actually looked at owls as being in relation to the lights, some kind of occurrence where light is reflecting off of an actual owl and creating this ball of light that's seen by individuals. So there's many different explanations as to what these could really be. But the fact that an owl was remembered in this context with a period of time missing, I just find that intriguing. There are occurrences where sometimes these orbs are associated with actual cryptids. I know like I mentioned, the lights that were seen at the Marfa areas out of Texas, a lot of people attribute that to sometimes being UFO related as well. It is worth noting that there is actually a lot in certain time periods. There was a lot of airport and I believe Air Force work that was done around that general area. I believe that was in the late 40s to 50s for a period of time. I'll have to double check on my sources there. However, getting back to this account. Now, again, it's red. It shot off down a direct path as soon as it was noticed. That goes hand in hand with many of these other things where necessarily it's not trying to escape, but it's trying to roll you in. And again, they didn't go along for that ride, which is great. I'm happy that they didn't, because who knows what could have happened if they followed it. But they just carried on their own way, and that's, again, that period of time disappeared. So again, do I believe in these things? I really do. I think it's worth, again, interestingly fact enough that he mentions a drone, where it has a intelligence almost, and not as an actual being, but it's being directed as such. And I've been speaking with someone actually about fairies, and that is an episode I'm going to be doing at some point, because that blows my mind and fascinates me very much so, the whole concept of fairies and how it actually is more prominent in Ireland and in those other parts of the world that are much less cultivated by Western society and everything along those lines. But could fairies very well be something in relation to these? Are they piloting these? I'm not saying these things are necessarily mechanical, but it could just be energy. Something I speak to with Ruben and many of my other colleagues is energy is all around us, and you can tap into this energy. And who knows if you could tap into some kind of energy apparatus that just helps beam you around. It's fascinating. So that's just one thing just to kind of keep on the back burner in your mind and play around with. Who knows? But I think it's incredible. I'm excited, very much excited to dive deeper into this topic with Ruben as a main episode, because I think there's a lot of ground to actually cover. I'm trying to find more accounts that dive into the orbs and the lights, but at the same time, I know that it's an anxious topic to talk about. If you're out in the woods and you see something like this that you can't explain, it's just this light that's kind of coaxing you in. I mean, you'd be afraid of it. Do you trust it? Does it put you in that trance? I did this mention on my underground cave systems, but with national parks and everything, like in the United States alone, there's over 600,000 people that usually go missing per year. That's insane. And the amount of people that go missing in national parks, it doesn't take much for someone to wander off. There's so many reports. You can look at the missing 411 cases where you'll be out with your kids and you turn around for a second, the kid is gone. And I don't expect it to always necessarily be like a big cryptid Sasquatch or Dogman kind of like, coaxing them in like, hey, I got candy over here. I got like a puppy out in the back. Come help me find it or something like that. No, I think it could be something much more higher end. That's, for all we know, what if it were lights? Like I mentioned before, I have little nieces and nephews that as soon as you turn a light on in a room or a TV, they are honed into it. It is like a cat with a laser pointer. They're drawn to it and they would go to it if they were able to start walking, but they're still so young. So maybe there is something there. Maybe there is some essence or a light that just appears and it just starts pulling these kids towards it. You could even look at the movie Poltergeist actually as a good reference, where there's much more of a psychic paranormal connection there with the little girl and the discussion that it's having with her. But there's that light. There's always that light that you're kind of like trying to get to, and she gets pulled in. Like obviously the TV's turning on, but there's the light there that she keeps going up. She goes up to the TV and puts her hand on it, that she's drawn to the light. And it's even mentioned like, hey, when you're moving on or you're about to pass, like go into the light. Like it's amazing of this reference, and it's something I need to learn more about. I need to figure out more on this. So that's something that I will be diving more into with Ruben later on, and I'm going to do my darndest to find more accounts and experiences of this. So I hope you enjoyed this episode of Campfire Clues. Let's see, on the plate of scheduling here, we would have just done our second follow-up episode to the Barmanu of Pakistan, diving more into Geordie McGrainer's notes. That was a great episode, a whole bunch of stuff covered in that. It was a good time with Ruben. Our next episode dropping, I will actually be joined by one of my, a good friend, Carl. He's actually from Ireland, and he is going to be discussing banshees with me. So that should be great. I don't know much about banshees. He reached out to me with a whole roster of different, cryptids and folklore, different accounts that he want to dive into with me. I thought, okay, we got to get you on the show. We got to have you join us and just start talking about these things. So he's going to be joining us on Monday. You can look forward to that. And yeah, that's basically all I have for today. So until next time, you can find us at CryptidClues.ca. Social media, Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, and Patreon, ad-free early episodes there. And again, you can send an email to us at CryptidClues@gmail.com. We're happy just to say hi, see how it's going. And yeah, so until next time, everybody, take care and stay safe.